We'll see if this is a 50-point bomb that, he never does again, and it goes down as one of the most random 50-point bombs we've ever seen, or we're going to see more great moments from this guy moving forward, which would mean that the Houston Rockets, with Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood and Jayshawn Tate and all their draft picks, suddenly would qualify as a bright future team. The Mismatch, presented by FanDuel Sportsbook.
I mean, 50-point games are not easy to come by, much less when you are 20 years old. And he ends up with not only the 50 points, he ends up with double-digit assists in a Rockets game last night and breaks LeBron's record for the youngest to do that. And we'll get to their opponent in a minute. It wasn't like they were playing somebody else that, is at in the stretch run here, doesn't care about winning or losing. They're playing against the Milwaukee Bucks, for goodness sakes. Porter Jr., though, is someone that you and I have talked about a lot on this show, maybe more so than a guy that would typically have been drafted where he was. It started when we were getting ready for that draft, and anybody could go back and probably find this. And we were talking about draft prospects, and I said, look, I spent the whole weekend watching YouTube. I got down to this kid, and he's just better than the guys ahead of him. Like there's stuff that he does that the other guys don't do. So what's the deal? And I had him on my list of guys that won't fail just because I wanted to stump for this kid. And no lie, there was not one person. And I call college coaches, I call NBA executives, I call coaches, I call people that cover the individual teams. Not one told me you're safe in doing that. It was all, and I don't know, because, a kid grew up in very, very, very difficult circumstances and then had trouble when he went to college for the 1 year. He didn't even make it through that season. And so much that we talk about are, fit and structure can be such a huge thing. And, I watch it last night and I think to myself, this kid is so talented, and I hope that he can harness it. It's not been great situations for that. You don't want him going to a Cleveland situation. And then, they gave him away for literally nothing by his own fault. You know what I mean? By his own fault. Because evidently he went in and started screaming at the general manager in front of everybody and whatever because of a locker thing. It was crazy. And then now he goes to Houston. Hell, the kid was just in the news for bad news within the last week, And so what you were hoping is maybe he can go to Houston, maybe gets with John Lucas and he can get straightened out. I think last night it's one of those times where you sit there and you watch and you go, I hope this kid, can mature, figures it out, has the guidance, gets in a real structure, because he does have a crazy amount of talent, Kev.
Everything you said, that goes without saying. The mental aspect of the game, you hope that he's able to be on track and mature as a man.
Basketball's not a problem. It's all off court.
And that's exactly, you hope all that can take care of itself in time. And with Houston and some mentors there, watching, him in recent weeks, the playmaking ability he flashed at USC, like he showed the ability he has a will to pass the ball, a desire to pass the ball. And Houston's really leaning into that and giving the ball and giving him an opportunities to be a playmaker. And the main thing I saw in that 50-point game against the Bucks, if you compare his handle, his ability to generate space off the dribble now compared to a couple years ago at USC, totally different player. He is so much better off the dribble. And that was one of the key concerns with him about how good can he become as a ball handler. He clearly has shiftiness. He has that strong frame. He has quickness, but he was so raw off the dribble. He didn't really have many moves except for I believe the left to right crossover at the time. And now he has this nasty step back. sidesteps. He looks comfortable pulling up. Like, he just looks like a totally different player. And that's a testament to, despite, some difficulties up the court, clearly, that he's also putting in work off the court and is receptive to learning. And I saw a player who's made progress, and we'll see if this is a 50-point bomb that, he never does again, and it goes down as one of the most random 50-point bombs we've ever seen, or we're going to see more great moments from this guy moving forward, which would mean that the Houston Rockets, with Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood and Jayshawn Tate and all their draft picks, suddenly would qualify as a bright future team. So that could be the case if this is for real.
And for anybody out there, when I brought up, the whole Kevin Porter backstory, there is a great article that I recall that was written by Paolo Uggetti for the Ringer about Porter and about his upbringing. And it's not like, oh yeah, well, a lot of guys grow up rough. Like, if you read it, it's extreme. Like, I remember this article because it just explains, you know what I'm saying, like the difficulty with, and how many people, including Jamal Crawford himself, looked after him, because his father was a player, Kevin Porter Sr., and his father was a great player in the Seattle area. He grew up in a very rough part of Seattle. His dad went to prison and then got out of prison and then was murdered when Kevin was 4. And then his mom's having to work all the time. People see this level of talent that Kevin has. They're moving him around. There's adults in his life that are just trying to keep him out, because as the story says, that, like, if we don't keep him involved in all manner of things, the streets are going to get him. Because that's what that's the pull there. But this kid has this talent, and so they kept on trying to get him involved, which they did. And then he ends up having this outstanding high school career. And there are people in that Seattle area, and Jamal Crawford is quoted and mentioned a lot throughout the story. And I remember reading that and thinking, boy, I hope this kid, I hope this story ends up being a happy one, because to come from where he came from is such an amazing success story anyway, much less have the level of success he's clearly capable of maybe having if he can just stop sabotaging it. You know what I mean? Like, he sabotaged his year. He only had a year at USC, and he didn't even get to play in it, at the end. And he was there in Cleveland, and they end up just casting him aside. And you're thinking, oh my God, does he get another chance? And even as of last week, you're going, geez, man, don't bad news yourself out of the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so here's hoping that, after something like that happens last night, there's hopefully a lot of people that start to reach out and maybe something clicks. And he says, you know what? I'm done making any of these mistakes. I've got the opportunity to have an outstanding long NBA career, instead of being so close to maybe losing that NBA career and being a story of a guy that could have been. I hope it's a wake-up call. I do. You know what I mean? Because, golly, you watch those highlights last night, and it ain't like he took 50 shots. The field goal percentage is good. He was one of the best shooting nights probably of his life. 9 of 15 from 3, and that's the other thing that he's gotten better at too, Chris. Like, his shooting form looks cleaner. He's shooting free throws better than ever before. Yep. Over his last 15, 16 games, he's up over 80%. He shot around 50% from the free throw line at USC. So it's like you're seeing skill development. Hopefully there's maturity happening off the court, and all that comes together to create one of the best success stories, really in the league today, especially because it's not, obviously you talked about his life, and everybody should read that story by Paolo. The headline of it is Between a Rough Past and the NBA's Future. And it just gets into his past, and it's a great story by Paolo from a couple of years ago. I highly recommend reading it after you listen to the pod.